everybody. My name is Dorinda White. I'm the president of the DC Federation of Democratic Women. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. And just to give you a little brief background on who we are and why we are hosting this event. We are a state organization affiliated with the DC Democratic Party, and we are one of 33 state federations, including Puerto Rico, around the country under the National Federation of Democratic Women, which is a member of the Democratic National Committee. Our overall mission is to promote advocacy, training, and candidacy to empower and engage women at all levels of the Democratic Party. Here locally in DC, we consist of two clubs. The DC Federation of the DC Democratic Women's Club, under its president, Jeanette Mobley, who is on here on the screen, and our oldest club of 60 years, the Metropolitan Democratic Women's Club, headed up by President Estelle Lloyd. Today's mission, which we've all accepted, is to get information and understand the implications of voter suppression, how to effectuate civic engagement, and GOTV. We have as our guest the Washington Metropolitan Area President of the AFL-CIO, Dyana Forster, and Andrea Miller, who is the Executive Director from the Center for Common Ground and Reclaim Our Vote. Please, everyone, mute your, yes, please. And this is really going to be a train-the-trainer workshop. And the takeaways that we hope to share with you today, that's why I said get a pen and pad of paper, is number one, how to get out the vote, but also how to identify and deal with voter suppression that's taking place around the country. And before we start, I'd like to have a moment of silence for the passing of our civil rights leader and hero, Congressman John Lewis from Georgia. So a moment of silence, please. We're all silent anyway. Okay, thank you. With that said, I want to give you a brief rundown of the order of the day, how we're going to actually conduct this Zoom virtual workshop. What we're going to do is basically, if you could all please just mute yourselves, we're going to mute you also, but we're going to have a Q&A at the end, and we're going to start off now with, I'm going to present Dyana Forster. She's the newly elected president of the Metropolitan Washington Council for the AFL-CIO and a proud lifelong DC resident. She lives in Ward 7. Prior to being elected president, she served as a political community affairs director for the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, UFCW Local 400. Her work has supported national local campaigns for paid family medical leave, increasing the minimum wage to $15, and protecting immigrants' rights. So in addition to her professional work, she was elected to serve as board chair for Empower DC. She served as an at-large delegate to the 2016 Democratic National Convention, and she also served 2 terms as an ANC commissioner here in DC. And with that, I give the floor to Dyana Forster.
Hey, everybody. Good morning. Happy to see so many familiar faces, the names of people that I've worked with throughout the years. Let's see if I can make sure this is angled right so you can see me. Okay. You know, trying to get accustomed to the Zoom attire and presentation. So I, first want to say thank you to some of my mentors and some of the people that have always guided me and along the way. Madam Jeanette Mobley and Miss Estelle Lloyd are, kind of like the mothers in the DC Democratic Labor Movement, in the DC Democratic Movement, and even, me and labor always been people that I can go to for advice. So I just want to start by saying that, waking up this morning, going to bed last night with the loss of John Lewis, was really, I'd never had a chance to work directly with him, but I was working on a $15 campaign in Atlanta and, was inspired by him, and my heart just like pounded, this icon when I had a chance to meet him, and then was arrested with him when we did the Standing for Immigrant Workers for the Dreamers, I think a year or two ago. So, you know, I thought about this as I reflected and prepared this morning about the moment that we're in, and then even reflecting on John Lewis's life, who committed to pushing back and fighting against voter suppression. So what a wonderful time to be having this conversation right now, this morning with you guys. So I just wanted to start off by saying that. I'm excited to be newly elected to the Metro Washington Labor Council. I worked for labor for, I used to say 10 years, but now I'm 40, so it's been a little longer than 10, about 17 years. And I never saw myself being the president of the council. And I will say, when you know, the race that I ran, it was the first contested election that people can remember. And we had 3 people running at the time. And I remember saying to myself, well, you know, let's let you know, the people decide. It's, you know, now it's time more than ever that voters need to decide, our members need to decide who best represents them. And even looking at the Democratic stage last year, we had all of these candidates on the stage, and for the political analyst in me, who wants to look at data and wants to, you know, focus on voter drives and turning people out to vote, was a little annoyed that the Democratic stage had 2 rounds of candidates on there, and I felt like it was really going to water down our efforts to get our people to the polls. But then I had the chance to listen to the debates and realize that it was the first time that people were really paying attention and making the decision for themselves of who best represents them. And I know, like, in this moment, we got caught up in, you know, we get caught up in who can win and who shares our values, who inspires us. You know, we got a candidate like Obama who did both, you know, so we're a little spoiled with that. But, you know, I reflect on the candidates that were on the stage, and I think that everyone could relate to someone and felt like they were a part of a process. And I think that is the most important thing that we need to think about. You know, we think about voter suppression and think about the role of it, and it's to influence and stop, you know, one group of people from being disenfranchising them in the right to vote. And some of that can also be when you don't give them the diversity of candidates and you pick a candidate for them. So, you know, I think that through this past 2 years, we've had people that have identified with some candidates more than others. We've had people say, you know, this is who we feel like can win and best represent us. And I'll be, you know, real, you know, as an organizer, I never look to any politician to save us, right? It's always up to us to mobilize to get them elected, and then we mobilize to hold them accountable. So, you know, I think that having the conversation about voter suppression, and even as Dorinda and I were talking about this, you know, being in DC, we don't see voter suppression. We don't think that, you know, we have efforts that are trying to discourage our people from voting. And, you know, some of them are subtle, some of them are things that we don't recognize, some of the things that we don't think about. But if we're not intentionally thinking about how do we engage everyone in the process and making sure that we create opportunities, especially during this pandemic, how do we create opportunities in response to the moment that we're in to ensure that people can exercise their right to vote? So, you know, I actually look forward to the panelists coming after me and learning from her experience and the things that they've tried. You know, nationally, you know, we look at a lot of data, we look at numbers, we look at efforts. And here in DC, we have to think about, you know, even though we are very different from other places, when we talk about, you know, suppressing the right to vote, our vote is suppressed in Congress. So, you know, we have to look at what does it mean to truly engage our base. But I also think that, you know, and I've seen you guys lead efforts like this before, we got to help our folks in Virginia and our folks in North Carolina. And, you know, have mobilized to make sure that we're getting good Democrats elected across the country, because it's not just to have a Democratic president that's tied by a Republican-controlled Congress. So we need to make sure that we're expanding our efforts beyond where we are, because it impacts us, which I know I'm preaching to the choir. I would say, with this pandemic, it started as Super Tuesdays were rolling out, and I was very nervous, as I'm sure other people were, about the turnout. And I think we saw historical numbers. I would say myself, I refused to do the mail-in ballot because I appreciate and going to the ballot and casting my vote. And I was trying to be very responsible about that. But my grandmother raised me to appreciate and understand the right to vote. And it was never something that we debated in our house. It was, you do it because your ancestors fought and died for you to have that right. So, there's something momentous about going to the polls on election day and getting that sticker. And I have to say, there were really cool stickers at the polls this time. So, I think that with the conversation we're having around voter suppression, we have to be more intentional moving forward about how are we actually getting people here in DC, and then also how do we impact national elections to turn people out to the polls. And if we don't think about that and we continue operating as we have, then we are contributing to suppressing the vote of so many people. I'll also say that, I remember when Obama's term was almost up, and I remember being in Florida and attending some of the rallies, and even being in Atlanta, and for Trayon White and in the uproar around the police brutality. And I was concerned that we would feel, here we have a Black president, but yet Black men are still dying. And how do we engage people that feel like no matter if they vote, no matter what they do, that we're still dying, right? People aren't paying attention to the things that impact us. And I thought about that a lot during the last election, even working for Hillary. And I think that what we saw is like we needed to be just as bold and aggressive and call out the injustice as the man in the White House has, right? Like he says radical, crazy stuff that gets people upset and, angry. But I think we as Democrats, right, we've been professional, and we polled, and we made sure that when we say things, we're saying them the right way. We've been polite. But, it's time to say that this system is screwed up, and, it's designed to keep people in a place where they're constantly fighting to have a voice. So we should be radical and say the things as, the man in the White House has said it. And I think what we've seen is it's not going to be, it's about issues, talking to people about issues, talking to people about racial justice, talking to people about economic and social justice, having enough money to put food on the table, to take care of your kids, talking to people, everyday people, in a way that connects with them, and making sure that they take that energy, the anger, the hurt that we feel in the streets right now, make sure that we take that to the polls. But we also have to realize that it's not after the election, after election day, that the work is not done. Whoever is in office, whether it's a local office, whether it's in the president, city council, we have to continue that same energy of making sure they understand the real issues that people are facing into their tender as they move into their role as elected officials. So I think that when we talk about how do we make sure, how do we push back against voter suppression, I think it's about talking to everyday people about the issues that impact them. It's not going to be about a candidate. It has to be about who actually made sure that workers were going to work every day with protective equipment. Who made sure that schools were opening responsibly? Where did they stand on those issues? Things have got to change. who is going to be the person that changed that. We have to look at voting records. We have to make sure that we have elected officials that are willing to take bold stance, especially now. You know, he said the man in the White House says whatever comes across his little mind and is unapologetic. So we have to make sure that we are giving our elected officials and our candidates what they need from us to be the same, to be bold and to fight for our issues. And we have to make sure that we are connecting everyday people's concerns to the ballot and understanding what that looks like, especially during this time of COVID. I think that, you know, we can talk here about voter suppression, but we also have to talk about voter mobilization in the moment that we're in. I think we saw record numbers of turnout in Virginia. Virginia doubled its number of turnout from 2016. North Carolina too, and Utah. And, you know, even here in DC, people were waiting in line for, you know, Ward 8 to like midnight. And I mean, there's something inspiring about that we have to grab a hold of and make sure that we're taking that into November. So I feel like I definitely said a lot and need to catch my breath. I'm going to pause and sit back and listen to some of the wonderful lessons that Ms. Miller has learned across the country, and look forward to honing that in on the district as we move forward to this election cycle.
Okay, thank you so much, Dyana, for joining us today and sharing your perspective on where things are. And congratulations again on being elected as the new president. That's a really big deal, and we're glad that you're a member of the DC Federation of Democratic Women. For those of you who have just joined, I will share that we did have a moment of silence earlier for Congressman John Lewis, who passed away. And I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the chair of the DC Democratic Party, Charles Wilson, is on, along with Linda Gray, who is the vice chair of the DC Democratic Party. And as other people join, I will announce them. But with that, we're getting on to the main focus of today's gathering, which is to speak about voter suppression, get out the vote, and civic engagement. And we have as our special guest, Andrea Miller, who is the founding board member of the Center for Common Ground. Andrea is an election turnout strategist working with underrepresented voters in Virginia, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, Arizona, North Carolina, and Colorado. She is also the founding tri-chair of the Virginia Poor People's Campaign. On January 1st, she helped launch the National Women's Political Caucus of Virginia and is currently acting president. She has worked as a lobbyist, legislative director, political director, and was a regional organizer for MoveOn.org. Andrea is both an organizer as well as a digital advocacy expert. I strongly urge everyone on the phone who wants to gather information from what she's going to share, have a pad and a pen available to start taking notes, because you will either use her information or you will be able to share it with someone else. So with that, I open the floor to Andrea Miller.
Dorinda, thank you so very
Andrea?
much. Yes, I'm here. Hello. And I should be unmuted. There we go. Oh, I'm here, yes. Dorinda, thank you so very much for that introduction, and everybody, thank you so much for being here. I've worked elections probably since I was maybe 4 years old. I had two uncles who were aldermen in the Chicago Daily Machine. So when I was 10 years old, my mother told me two things about elections that I've never forgotten. And that's been, 50 some odd years ago. Number one, she said, if you're ever going to run for office in Chicago, make sure you get the dead vote. I was like, what? She said, yes. She said, the living vote once, but the dead always vote at least 3 times. And the other thing she said was, there is no election run in the city of Chicago where Mayor Daley doesn't know who won before the first vote is cast. So what I learned about elections at a very early age is having a turnout strategy and really understanding who your voter base is really critical. And also, it is very, very critical to, number one, protect the vote, and number two, know and understand and have some control over how the votes are counted. So I put together a little presentation that I am going to share with you today. And why don't I get it on the very first slide? And we will be ready to go. So my organization, as Dorinda said, is Center for Common Ground, and we run a campaign called Reclaim Our Vote. And the reason the campaign has that name is when I went back and started analyzing the numbers from past elections, I looked at who voted and I looked at who didn't vote. And what I saw in so many elections was we had a very strong base of progressives, Democrats, whatever you want to call them. But what was missing was the community of color vote. The voters were there, they were registered, they could vote, but they didn't. So what I started asking myself was, why didn't those voters vote? So what you're going to be seeing in my slides is what I've learned and the solutions that we are implementing in 2020. Now, Center for Common Ground is in Virginia, and I have worked Virginia elections 2016, 17, 18, 19. So Virginia was the only, quote, Southern state to win in 2016. We came within one seat of the Virginia House in 2017. In 2018, Virginia took control of her congressional delegation. And in 2019, Virginia took control of her state Senate and her state House. And I was thrilled to have worked in every one of those elections. So as I said, here are my strategies, and this is what I did. Now, the mission of Center for Common Ground is very simple. We empower underrepresented voters. And up until this year, we considered underrepresented voters community of color voters, Black, Hispanic, Asian, Native American. This year, the board is actually going to look at declaring 18 to 24-year-olds of all races underrepresented voters, meaning when we had elected officials within this age group, we find the fewest number of elected officials. So yes, while they're 18 to 24, they are too young to run for Congress, but they are not too young to run for many local offices and also many state offices. In addition to doing voter registration, voter turnout, we are also a technology company. And so we are going to be very, very focused on what happens after 2020. Normally, when we have a presidential election, especially, and even a federal election, the day after the election, all the infrastructure goes home. We have built a lot of our tools. We either give them away or we make them very, very inexpensive so that the grassroots organizations on the ground will be able to continue their organizing and their work after that election is over with state-of-the-art tools. Now, let's talk about the state of voting in the United States. There are 245 million age-eligible voters. Of that 245 million, 48 million are either inactive or unregistered. You will hear me use the term deregistered, meaning these are voters that used to be registered and they have been removed from the voting rolls. Unregistered voters would be voters who have never been registered. So I'll call them deregistered from now on. 16.6 million of those voters are community of color, and they are either inactive or unregistered going into the 2020 election. Now, federal law says states can only purge their voters up until August. So whoever is on the voting rolls in August should remain on the voting rolls through November. We already know that Georgia is talking about purging 2 million voters. Florida just purged 600,000. We know North Carolina is talking about purging somewhere between 500 and 700,000. And these purges consist of voters who have not voted in anywhere from the past 2, 3, or 4, it varies wildly per state, federal elections. So one of the biggest misconceptions that American voters have, and it is going to prove very costly to them and us in 2020, is people mistakenly believe that once they register to vote, they will be registered for life. And that is just so not true. We like to talk about the right to vote. There is no right to vote in America. Many of us have an ability to vote. If it was a right, they couldn't take it away because we chose not to execute it. They couldn't take it away because of a felony conviction. So we are going to have to work very, very hard at the end of this election to make sure that voting goes into the United States Constitution as a right, not something that was a right for the 1% of their day, that we have expanded an ability to other people who were not included. Remember, when at the founding of this country, the only people who had the right to vote were rich, white, land-owning men. If you were a woman, nope. Women didn't get the ability to vote until 1920. If you were Black, nope. Black folks didn't get the real ability to actually vote and vote in relative safety until the 1960s. There were laws on the books that said we could, but they didn't stop all the things the states put in place to say, actually, no, you can't. Now, what's voter suppression look like these days in the states? These are the big ones. You will be deregistered for not voting. There are strict photo ID requirements. In many states, Black folks couldn't be born in hospitals until the late 60s, early 70s. So that meant that you didn't have hospitals automatically sending in documents to get birth certificates and things like that. In order to get a photo ID, you've got to have a birth certificate or a certified copy of a birth certificate. Certified copies of your birth certificate, number one, aren't easy to come by, and they certainly are not free. So for a lot of our older Black folks living in rural areas, they don't have a certified copy of their birth certificate, so they are not eligible to get a photo ID, which means while they may want to vote, they're not. Most of these states have no same-day registration, and they certainly don't have automatic registration. So what happens is when you get disenfranchised for not voting, most people have no idea that they have lost their ability to vote. Generally, the Board of Elections says they sent you a postcard, and on that postcard, people get it. Their name's correct, their address is correct. And they're like, yeah, okay, everything's good. And they throw it away. They miss the fine print that said, if you don't return this postcard, if you don't call our office, we are going to be removing you permanently from the voting rolls. There is nothing sadder than being at the polls and watching someone present themselves to vote only to discover they are no longer registered to vote. And what we're going to see this year that we really haven't seen a lot of since the 1960s is we are going to see old-fashioned, hardcore, very, very ugly voter intimidation at the polls. Mr. Trump from the White House has called out the militias. Now, they will probably not be out in the wealthy white neighborhoods. We know where they are going to be. We've got a counter strategy for that too. So normally our organization does not work in primary elections. We worked in primary elections this year for one reason. We wanted to see the form and the format of voter suppression. We wanted to see how effective it was going to be so that we could use technology where possible to counter it, and then we could come up with alternate plans where we needed to. So our original target states were Alabama, Arizona, Georgia, Mississippi, North Carolina, and Texas. And people are going, ooh, you picked the hard states. Got a question for people on the line. You don't have to say anything, but I want you to think about it. In 2020, the prize on November 3rd is 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I think everybody knows that. That's kind of why we're all here. We get that. There is one number that is meaningful, and there is only one number. What number of votes do we have to take control of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue? That number is, whoops, and our new target states are Florida and South Carolina. And let me go past all this. Oh, all right, this is the old presentation. I didn't get the new one. That number is 270. It's the number of electoral votes we need. So I'll talk about our campaigns, and then I'll talk about why the states that we are choosing, because we didn't pick any easy ones, why we chose those states. We run 4 different types of campaigns at Center for Common Ground. We used to run 2. We register voters. We want to add to the voter rolls. Normally, when you re-register a voter, they're a little bit ticked off that they got deregistered in the first place, and they're generally going to turn out and vote just for spite, if nothing else. We also, of course, do GOTV, get out the vote. We've got a real specific way of doing GOTV. This year, we've added 2 more campaigns. We realized we were only doing 1 touch for registered active voters with GOTV, so we decided to add an extra one. We started asking voters to pledge to vote. We want you to think about voting starting in July. We want you to think about how you're going to vote, and we're going to want you to think about what else you can do. Can you help your neighbors get organized and vote? We don't know if we're actually going to be going to the polls, but can you drive people to the polls? Can you make phone calls? Can you text? What else can you do? We wanted to get people starting to think about that. And then this year, because of COVID-19, we actually got involved with vote by mail, but we got involved in a big way. We trained people and we taught them how vote by mail works, because vote by mail is different than showing up at the polls. It's harder. There's a lot of rules. There's a lot of weird little details that you've got to follow exactly. And in Arizona, we have this marvelous thing called PEVL, the Permanent Early Voting List. So far, now we started our work in 2020 on January 4th. It would have been tacky to start on January 1st, and we figured people still were going to be hungover from December 31st on January 2nd, so we gave them a couple of days and we started on January 4th. So far, we have made 401,000 phone calls. Actually, I don't have the numbers from last week, so the numbers are higher than that. And these are the states that we've been calling. The Texas numbers are way higher than that. Texas just had a primary, and so we had people on the phones. We built our own texting program because when my board member found out that I had spent $10,000 buying a package of 100,000 texts for Virginia last year, he said, well, you do know that it costs 1 penny to send a text, not 10 cents. I said, well, it might cost a penny, but they sell them for 10 cents. So that was on a Wednesday night. Friday morning, he called me, get some people together. I've got a prototype of a new texting program. It costs a penny to send a text. So we have our own texting program. We'll begin working in Arizona on July 24th. Arizona's got a congressional primary coming up. We'll be doing the North Carolina Pledge to Vote. Alabama's got Pledge to Vote. And then it looks like we may do a couple of things for the Florida primary. We're waiting for partners. So far, we've sent over 3 million postcards. Last year in 2019, we sent 347,000 postcards, and I thought that was great because we had never done postcarding in our existence. This year, we've really ramped up our postcarding because we discovered, darn, the way we postcard, it's far more effective than what most people do. We even designed our own line of postcards. The other thing that we discovered is, well, we always knew this, we don't have good phone numbers for all the voters. But what we do have, and it's correct, 80 to 85% of the time, is we've got an address. So our current postcard capacity is 200,000 to 300,000 per week. By the end of August, we will be at 500,000 postcards per week. That will be our capacity. Our volunteers buy their own postcards. They hand write the postcards. Especially for voter registration. People already got a postcard, and it was a formal official postcard. They didn't pay any attention to it. So we send them a beautifully designed postcard. Power to the people, vote for our lives, vote your power. People notice those postcards. And on the back, we give them a very short message. And then if we're telling them about a problem, you might not be registered to vote anymore, we tell them how to fix that problem. If you're online, here, go online, check your registration. If you are not online, here, call this number. Now, why do we know our postcards work so well? Because I am apparently personally hated by virtually every registrar in North Carolina, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, and everywhere we have postcarded. So we have some postcarding campaigns coming up. We just did a small one for Florida. And I wanted to have a big slide so you could really see what the postcards look like. And our postcards were designed by a fellow Virginia Poor People's Campaign coordinating committee member who herself is an undocumented immigrant. So these postcards were very, very personal to us. And now there's the slide I was looking for. 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is going to cost us 270 electoral votes. The states that we are looking at, we are 39 electoral votes short in 2016. All the states we won in 2016, we will again win. We are 39 votes short. So that means we need new states. You will notice Texas has 38 of the 39 votes we need. I am in love with Texas. Actually, I have been there. I was going to say I've never been there. North Carolina has 15 electoral votes. We worked in North Carolina in the 3rd Congressional District special election. North Carolina and Texas are two states that are undergoing radical population changes. There are 9 congressional districts in Texas that don't look like Texas at all. They kind of look like California, New York, and/or New England. They have become the mecca for the high-tech industry in Texas. And Texas, these are some interesting numbers. 13 million voters, 1 million African American, 3.2 million Hispanic, 276,000 Asian. Texas is 33% community of color. Normally, I tell people if I have a state where I have 20% community of color voters, when I look at the percentage that the non-community of color voters have put down as a base, and then I look at how many community of color voters did not vote, and I have voters to turn out, that tells me I've got a real possibility for winning statewide in that state. Now, in January, Texas had 5.1 million deregistered voters. Texas has a unique form of voter suppression, and that is you must renew your voter registration every 2 years. You renew your voter registration more frequently than you renew your driver's license. Now, currently, and this is as of today, because I checked right before I had to do this presentation. Currently, there are 4.5 million deregistered voters in Texas. 2 million of those voters are community of color. So we have work to do. Texas is currently in the process of purging voters. We had gotten that number down to 4.1 million. And as you can see, at 4.5 million, it's beginning to climb up again. Now, what's Texas look like by the numbers? Because for me, elections are all about numbers. Well, you've already seen there's 1 million plus African American voters. In 2018, 534,000 of them, 535,000 of them voted. In 2016, 582,000 of them voted. In 2020, I want at least 699,000 of the 1 million African American voters. I want them turning out and voting. Now remember, I've got more than 3 million Hispanic voters. I want to push that turnout close to 2 million. So I want to increase the turnout of all my community of color groups by at least 20%. When we went into Alabama in 2017 with that same idea, we actually increased voter turnout in all of our counties on average by 34%. And that was enough to win Alabama. Now, I call this the Bitecofer 9. Rachel Bitecofer, who lives in Virginia, is an analyst and a strategist. And when she was looking at Texas, she said, even though Beto didn't win in the 2018 election, there were 9 districts where he got at least 44% of the vote. These are the 9 districts, and these are the number of community of color voters in each of these districts. Now, when I analyzed the turnout, we had less than 50% of the eligible community of color voters turn out. So that means I've got voters. All right, now, this district, or these 9 districts, also no longer look like Texas. These are, I guess, oil industry districts, only instead of the wildcatters that used to live there, this is now the high-tech IT center for the oil industry. So the median income is drastically higher than most of Texas. My lowest median income is $53,000. We also have a much higher percentage of people with a BA degree or higher. And again, my lowest one is in District 23. And that is an open seat, meaning we don't have an incumbent. So that seat is definitely up for grabs. All right, now, these are going to be numbers that are going to nearly stop your heart. They nearly stopped mine. 2018, these are primary numbers. The general wasn't a lot better, but these are primary numbers. So I'm showing you the most off. In District 10, among 18 to 24-year-olds, they had an opportunity to vote for a man who would be more of an age of an older brother than their father or their grandfather. And out of 18,155 18 to 24-year-olds who could have voted, only 756 of them showed up. All right? Our young people, 18 to 24, they are the most registered generation in the history of our country. They are also the most non-voting generation in the history of our country. Now, 25 to 34-year-olds, we got a little better, kind of, sort of. Out of 20,259 people who could vote, 1,366 showed up. The numbers did not get substantially better until the voters hit 45 years of age and over. We are dying out. We are literally aging out of the voting system. We've got to make investments in this 18 to 40-year-old group, because you can see in all my target districts, this is where my numbers are, the 18 to 40-year-olds. Now, Alabama has 9, or is that North Carolina? Yeah, that was, who is that? Oh, this is North Carolina. North Carolina is another state where we worked in 2019, significantly smaller than Texas. Basically, almost everything is. Our 3 biggest states are California. Technically, they're a country. Texas, they're almost a country. And then we have New York and Florida. So when we look at North Carolina at nearly 6 million voters, North Carolina is a very interesting state. We have won statewide in North Carolina, but we were never able to make much of an impact on the congressional districts. Well, North Carolina got ungerrymandered. And when we look at the voter turnout, we can see in 2020, we've got some voters that we can turn out in North Carolina. So with North Carolina and Texas alone, if we only took those 2 states, that basically wins in the Electoral College. Again, I want 2020 to be a statement year where we put an exclamation point on it. Again, I did a similar analysis in North Carolina. Dorinda's going to get the PowerPoint. So if you're a nut like me and you really want to sit here and stare and study these numbers, you will be able to do that, because I gave you all the research in North Carolina that I did for Texas. North Carolina, the 18 to 24-year-olds, we didn't do any better. This was last year. Actually, this was 2018, out of 21,000 18 to 24-year-old voters, 633 of them voted. I know, it's just too depressing to even think about. So this is what we're looking at, and we're seeing the same kind of low turnout in all of our target states. It is the older voters that are making us almost competitive And we have the younger voters who could put us way over the top at the federal level, at the state house level, and even at the local level. Voters of color and young voters are our power voters in 2020. If they vote, we win big. If they don't, it's going to be a really ugly next 4 years. This is a picture of the texting program that we built. We call it Text%. It was named by an engineer, so it's got a dumb name that we're stuck with. And what this program allows us to do is Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, and Texas, 4 of our states, and actually Florida, use vote centers for early voting, meaning people can vote before Election Day. And we're really going to be strongly encouraging people to vote before Election Day to try to cut down on those lines. The problem with vote centers is it's not the one address, one polling location that most voters are used to. It's you live in a county, we've got 20 polling locations in the county. You can vote at any one of the 20 locations. Now, they're not all open at the same time or the same days. Is that a problem? Oh, and gee, we kind of move them around. So if you early voted in the last election, where you early voted in the last election, that's probably not where you're going to be able to early vote this election. And in order to find out where the early voting centers are, we put them on a website. So is that a problem? Yeah, it kind of is. So what we designed our texting program to do is when we text people, if they tell us they want to early vote, we look up their closest early voting center and we tell them when it is or where it is. What we've added to this is we now tell them the dates and times that it's open, because as I said, they're not all open on the same dates and the same times. Now, young people, college campuses. If you've ever tried calling 18 to 24-year-olds, their parents answer their phones, they don't. So we needed another way to reach out to our young voters. So what we did in North Carolina 3, and what we're going to be doing this year, is we're going to be geofencing. You're going to be doing what? We're going to be geofencing. We're going to do the same thing that the NRA does. It works for them. We can make it work for us. When we geofence, we have already looked up every college and every university in the states where we are working. We will geofence those college servers. So whether the students are back on campus or whether they're still going to school remotely, when we geofence their college server, we can find every device that is connected to that web server. And we can then send them ads where we can say things like, our votes decide elections, Black voters matter, or if we're in Texas, we can have Spanish ads. We have 100 interns where one of their projects will be coming up with a series of ads that we'll be able to use for geofencing. And then once people click on these ads, we can take them into a special program that we're making available and we've invested in for younger folks, where they can go in, they can create a team for their college, they can compete for prizes, but it asks them, who are you? Check your voter registration, and then it shows them who is on their ballots and the issues, and most importantly, it's shareable on social media. One of the other things we discovered, especially in urban areas and sometimes in rural areas as well, a lot of older voters who are our most consistent voters don't have a way of getting to where voting is. In rural America, especially Black rural America, they have closed many of the polling locations. In rural America, there is very little and often no public transportation. So we built a tool called Give a Ride. So when we phone bank for GOTV, we ask people, do you need free rides to the polls? If they say yes, then that information gets transferred into Give a Ride. We work with boards of elections. Sometimes we have to sue them to get the information. Sometimes they willingly give it to us, where we will have every polling location in the state, so that when we have someone who wants a ride, we know exactly where it is that they vote. So we put them in Give a Ride. We confirm that, yes, they still want a ride. We assign them to a driver, and then the driver has a map. This is where that voter is. The drivers sign up by precinct, saying, we are willing to take anybody that votes in this precinct with voting centers, anybody that votes in any of these voting centers. That's how we determine physical area. And then people who sign up, when they click on a voter, they will see a map. This is how I get to this voter's house from wherever I am. It's Google Map enabled. Once they get to the voter's house, directly below the voter is, this is where you're going to take them to vote. When they click on that, they get turn-by-turn directions on, this is how you get to where the voter votes. It's going to be interesting this year. We think we may need to use it to allow people to take their mail-in ballots, drop them in drop boxes, or take them to early vote locations. We will be figuring that out just like everybody else. We adjusted Give a Ride so that it's not just set up to work on election day, but any combination of days that we say. Now, we need to win in 3 places in 2020 or in any federal election. Number one, we need to win on campus. So we've got to get the young folks out to vote. We've got a strategy and we're working on others. Number two, we've got to win in our congressional districts. That is going to strengthen our federal representation. Number three, we have to stop giving up on rural voters. So we phone bank, we postcard, and in rural areas, we buy digital billboards. And we put up a billboard that will stand there 24/7, speaking to voters. This was a billboard we used in North Carolina 3 for early voting. The people who helped us, the locals who helped us place the billboards, one woman sent me a note. She said, I took my 90-year-old father to see this billboard. She said he had to get out of the car, and he stood there for 5 minutes staring at that billboard. She said, and finally, she said, he was crying. And I'd never seen my father cry before. And he said, this is the first time in my life I have ever seen people invest and say, my vote mattered. And then we have our Reclaim Our Vote campaign. We love digital billboards. They're $1,500 a piece, but they go up instantly. We can have them up in 20 minutes. And we have normally 2 to 4 pages where we can put in our message. And we can tell people where the digital voting guide is. In some states, it'll be Motivote. In other states, Black Voters Matter may have civic engagement guide. Whatever the guide is, we'll be able to have it on the billboard. So that's probably enough from me. I am going to stop my share and say, okay, questions. You're stunned. They're like, we fainted.
Okay. Hold on, let me start my video again here. Okay, everyone, please raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, and we'll unmute you. Raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, and we will unmute you.
And while we're waiting for that, we have one more strategy that we don't have in these slides yet because we're still working on it. We figure if the other side is going to be outside the polls trying to intimidate voters, then we are going to begin a massive recruitment campaign for younger people, 19 to maybe 30, to be inside the polls as paid poll workers, so that in community of color districts, when people come in to vote, they are warmly greeted as opposed to the greeting we sometimes meet.
Okay, Andrea, I have a question here from our chair of our DC Democratic Party, Charles Wilson. He's basically saying, how do we as DC Dems get involved in your postcard program, and what will be our responsibility?
Our postcard program is wonderful. We are investing in full automation of it. In the chat, I am going to put in how you can sign up for them. So let's see, bit.ly/ROV postcard home. That has a video on it where we walk through how we do postcards. Now, again, because we are a 501c3, all of our postcards are nonpartisan. You would be responsible for purchasing the postcards. We have a store where postcards, I just bought 5,000. 5,000 of the postcards you saw are $108 delivered. So it is phenomenal pricing. We then deliver to you, after you have your postcards, the scripts as well as the names and addresses of voters.
Okay, fantastic. Next question that we have here is, what is the strategy for reaching and engaging younger voters?
That's one of the reasons that I am very excited about the 100 interns that we have. And I do have a very small staff of 4, and they are all under the age of 30. And so anytime we are working on messaging younger voters, the words come from people of their generation, not me. And it's like, I don't need to understand what you're saying. If what you are saying speaks to 18 to 24-year-olds, then let's go ahead and let's say it. So that is what we're working on. When we build phone banks, we build phone banks for 18 to 40-year-olds. That has the messages that are appropriate for 18 to 40-year-olds. We have slightly different messaging for older voters.
Apologies.
Okay, the next question is, will you be texting to remind the voters to vote? Do you do that?
That's GOTV, yes. And again, we do a lot more than remind voters to vote. Again, we make sure that voters know where voting is. We make sure they know they need to bring their photo ID. On election day, we will be asking, do you need a ride to the polls? Let us know, and then we will sign you up for free rides to the polls. I maintain a national corporate Lyft account so that if I don't have a driver to take the voter, I use my corporate Lyft account and put them in Lyft. And then I see a question, have the Black Lives Matter leaders and spokespeople across the country been engaged? We don't do outreach to engage people. People contact us. I'm the only one here. So I respond when people reach out to me. So yes, we are working with Black Lives Matter. Several of the groups have contacted me, and then hopefully they engage with their own groups. We've asked them, would you like to design artwork for the geofencing, for postcards? We would like your art and your voice.
Okay, okay. Another question here is, how do you get lists of voters for people of color by ethnicity in rural areas?
There's a program called L2. Now, we do use VAN for some things. We are relying more and more on data from L2 because it allows us to finely parse ethnicity. We're going into Florida. So when we go into Florida, if we are going to engage Hispanic voters, L2 gives me country of origin. So I'm going to say we want to engage Hispanic voters who are from Puerto Rico, Mexico, or various countries in Central America, not Cuban. Those are generally the rich Republicans. So we can parse that finely.
Okay, do you plan to, will you be doing geofencing for HBCUs who historically are under-registered?
We do geofencing for all colleges and universities. We have a campus outreach person where her initial primary targets are HBCUs. She runs a twice a month phone bank where it is college students. She engages a DJ. She gets people signed up. She teaches folks about voter suppression. This is what it looks like. This is why we're doing what we're doing. She gets them signed up to phone bank, and then they can phone bank, and then she's got a DJ playing music in the background.
Okay. Next question is, thank you. How do you get L2?
L2 is a commercial product. So you can just, let me grab the L2. Let me get the link. You buy the data. L2 is not free. I buy a lot of data. So what I pay and what other people might end up paying can be very different. I pay a penny a record, and I am probably going to buy 6-7 million records from L2 because they have text numbers, phone numbers, names, and addresses. So I am a big buyer for L2.
Okay, we have a comment here from someone who says, suggesting that to reach younger voters, social media blast, Instagram, Snapchat, or formats for getting the word out to young persons to vote. So I'm guesstimating that your young people that you're working with will be using those methodologies to get it out.
Yes, because I don't have Snapchat, I don't use Instagram, I don't use social media at all. So I have young people where this is what they do. So yes.
Okay. The next question is, what is the #1 GOTV strategy that has replaced old-fashioned door-to-door canvassing?
Texting. And let me tell you why. Texting is the best strategy so far. It's expensive because normally you are going to have to go out and buy the cell numbers because in state voice is banned. In certain states, they have a lot of cell numbers. In other states, there's a dearth of cell numbers. What we have seen is when you call a voter they're in an urban area, if they don't know the number, they tend to not answer the phone, which is why we always leave messages. with texting, what we have discovered, so when we make phone calls, and that's this year, this wasn't true in 2017, but it is true this year. When we call urban voters, we find we are lucky to get a 5% response rate. When we text urban voters, our response rate is between 11 and 19%. People will look at a text and respond, even when they have no idea who sent it to them. The behavior is very different.
Okay. The next question is, if we want to put up a billboard in this area, what is the process and the cost?
Digital billboards are normally $1,500 per month. And not all counties have digital billboards. So, and they're also very expensive. A regular paper billboard is $400 to $600 a month, but it takes 10 days to install it. So that means if you're doing a GOTV campaign and you put up information about early voting, then you're going to have to take down the early voting information before it's really over to get the information installed for election day. That is why we use digital billboards.
Okay. Next question is, do you have webinar sessions like this for the college students, especially since this year many schools are going to be online?
No. We only have what Aditi does, and it used to be on Saturday afternoon. It looks like she's going to move it to Thursday evening. So that is specifically designed for young people. It's run by young people. I occasionally go to it, and you know, I understand at least half of what they're saying, but they're having a good time, and so it's for them. That doesn't matter.
And how would we get information or a link to that so that we can share this with other young people, or is that widely shareable?
What I will do is I will check with Aditi, see has she settled on a date, and then we have sign-up links. And then Dorinda, I will get you the sign-up links. And then once you get on the email list, then we put out here are all the ones that are scheduled for the month. We expect that we're going to schedule more. We may end up doing one that would be a combination of phone banking and texting. We're not really sure because we've got the phone banking, which I don't really consider geared toward young people. I look at the texting as more geared toward young people, but we do have more phone numbers than we have cell numbers. So,
Okay. Next question is, have you considered using QR codes as part of the marketing strategies for the hard to reach populations, especially those that are afraid of the public charge rule?
No. And the reason is that not everyone knows how to deal with QR codes, what they are, and how they work. So one of my board members, they experimented with it while voters were standing in line in South Carolina. Black Voters Matter did a thing where, here, take a picture of this QR code and we'll give you a free pizza and a drink. Very few people were like, what? That's what am I supposed to do? You know, and then they would hold up the camera and take a picture. Like, no, you just, so they kind of experimented with the wording, and it was not a very successful campaign.
Okay. Someone made a comment that using these social media platforms will only engage a small percentage of younger voters. For example, her 25-year-old is only voting for Biden because he doesn't want another 4 years of Trump.
Right. It's
Biden
Trump, right.
Yeah.
That's my 25-year-old, by the way.
Oh, well, and that's my 28-year-old, my 39-year-old, My 35-year-old son's a Republican, so he's not voting for Biden, but whatever. We might be lucky. He might not vote this year.
Okay. It's another question, comment and question is, our vote in DC was in effect subject to voter suppression in our June primary. In the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, how can we train a new generation of poll watchers and greeters in DC?
Well, one of the things that you mentioned, Dorinda, that happened was they closed polling locations, and we know that's going to happen in many of the states because of COVID. They're not going to be able to get enough poll watchers. So one of the things that my young people do is they scour the websites, constantly updating our list of polling locations so that if we get word this is not going to be a polling location, we can delete it from our list, we re-upload the master list so that while our texters are sending texts, we're not giving people the wrong information. So we know that this year polling locations are going to change. That is a fact of life. So what's important is having a methodology so that if you are texting people, you are updating what the correct locations are. I have a board member where once we have the master list of these are the polling locations, he generates a map. And one of the things that we will do in our texting program is we will text people a map and we'll say, hey, would you like a map of the places that are currently scheduled to be voting centers, polling locations? And many states are now saying on their website, these locations are subject to change based on poll worker availability, which is why if we get younger people signed up to work the polls, the more poll workers a state, county, whatever has, the more likely it is that they will not close polling locations. And younger people are less susceptible to COVID-19 than older people. So I don't know about you, but where you vote, but I know when I would go to vote at my precinct, I'm 66 years old. I was looking like the young thing in that precinct.
Okay. Next question is, has there been any recent guidelines on using robocall for cell phones?
Number one, we have never believed in robocalls, and I know they were attempting to basically outlaw them because people hate them. So we have always believed, but again, we have between 12 to 15,000 volunteers that call the voter and then we leave messages and that lets the voter know what we want them to do. When we're dealing with things like vote by mail, a robocall realistically wouldn't work. We give people a number or a website where they can go and get more information. People understand going to vote, voting at the polls, and I need a ride, call this number. They don't understand vote by mail. So there are going to be many, many subjects. And in this election, people are going to have a lot of questions. And a robocall is really just so not going to cut it. They're going to need a human on the other end of the line. So my phone bankers talked a lot about spending time with older voters, literally walking them through, this is what you're going to need to do with the mail-in ballot. Now, make sure you signed it, or, you know, even personally giving people their number. Now, call me when you get your mail-in ballot and we'll do it together. Okay, thank you. You know, that was definitely, in my mind, way above and beyond the call of duty. And then we hold office hours where every time we go into a new state or begin a new campaign, we train our volunteers. This is why we're doing this campaign. These are the issues that voters may have. They may have these questions. Here are the answers. And we give our volunteers a full write-up on, this is why we're doing it, this is what we're doing, and this is where voters may encounter problems.
Okay. Next question, which is really interesting, is you've mentioned that you have several groups and teams of people that are working with you. If any of us want to work, if any one of us want to work with your team, what is the methodology for us to get involved? Do you have any private passwords, web pages like Google Docs or Dropbox to house your data for access?
We are building a custom system right now to share all of the data for postcarding because we have voters' names and addresses. So all of that will be housed in our special tools. You will sign on, you will put in the number of names you're requesting, and then this system will download your script and the names. For our level 1 distributors, it will require a level of authorization from someone on the national team. The level 1 distributors have their own system. Normally, they know their postcarders. We have 27 regional coordinators. We are hoping to have at least 70 by the time we get to October. And then we will convert hopefully more than half of them to be regional organizers, where we're actually getting started with people that are living in our target states who are the regional organizers, because they will know people in their state. They will know the lay of the land. We don't have people in all states yet, but we have them in Texas, North Carolina, in Georgia. So we, and actually now Alabama's coming online. We've got Alabama. We don't have South Carolina. They're a brand new decision.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a website about your organization, and what help do you provide for rural Pennsylvania? Wow.
No. The states that we have chosen have at least a 20% community of color population. Pennsylvania as a state is 12% community of color. So the board would need to decide they were willing to look at Pennsylvania. People frequently ask us about Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Ohio, and Michigan. And our response is the state overall is not 20% community of color. Yes, there are areas that are, but we normally look at the state overall.
Okay, thank you. We know that younger persons of color are wearing masks and social distancing less than older voters. What is the strategy for polling places if there's another surge of COVID-19? What do you think is the strategy?
Again, in the states that have early voting, we are going to be pushing vote by mail if the state is reasonable. In Arizona, we are pushing get on the permanent early voting list. That way, every election, they're going to just mail you your ballot. Doesn't matter what's going on. It could be raining frogs. You aren't going to need to go outside and deal with it. So we only have permanent early voting lists in Arizona. We would love to see other states begin to adopt such a thing. We will not be pushing vote by mail in North Carolina because North Carolina requires a witness, and that is just really going to be problematic for our older rural voters who basically live alone. We're not even dealing with that. So in some states, we will really be pushing early voting. In Texas, our hands are tied. We can only push vote by mail for voters who are 65 and older. There are lawsuits to expand vote by mail to everyone, but those lawsuits have not been heard. And based on what we saw in Texas, it was overturned, then the overturning was overturned, and then the overturning of the overturning was overturned. And we're like, we're going to just help people to go early vote. We know that works.
Okay. Question going back to the Dropbox concept that you mentioned earlier, because we know here in DC, for example, that we're all going to be receiving absentee ballots. What would you suggest that we suggest to our Board of Elections as a way to collect all of these ballots besides, so that we can avoid the ballots remaining on someone's countertop and not making it to the mailbox?
And again, that would be a very, very robust calling and or texting program, where we ask people, are you going to vote by mail? Are you going to early vote? Are you going to vote on election day? Everybody that says they're going to vote by mail, we have a sort of standard response. All right, now, your vote by mail ballot must be turned in by. And then we walk people through that. And in some states where it was very complicated, if you still had it after early voting, then we would explain, here, call this number, and then an operator will walk you through what you're going to need to do. In most states, as long as you bring your absentee ballot to the polls, if you've gone that long and it's election day and you're like, oh darn, then you can surrender it and you can vote a regular ballot. Again, we strongly, strongly encourage people, do something with that. Put that thing somewhere. DC, you're very, very interesting, that you don't have, mail. People don't have individual mailboxes where they pick up their mail. You can stick it in there.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. All you do is put it in your own mailbox. You don't have to go find a mailbox. Just put it in your own mailbox. And the United States Postal Service will deliver a vote by mail ballot, whether you put a stamp on it or not. That's one of the reasons why Orange Trash Fire and White House wants to get rid of the Postal Service.
Understood. Next question is there a group or team in your organizational structure looking to do outreach to all Greek letter organizations, since many strive to provide leadership in their respective communities and have national programs to get out the vote? I believe your data and statistics would help light fires to drive their processes.
We are working in North Carolina and Alabama with the NAACP. We are working with them directly, and they have engaged the Greek societies. We work with the Greek society. We work with the Deltas, the Kappas, the Alphas, and the Zetas in Virginia. So I'm going to say it has been very kind of hit or miss. We do zero outreach, none. We don't reach out to anybody. Our hands are tied managing 15,000 volunteers.
Wow. Okay. Another question that came up here is they said, well, postcarding is not going to work for young people. And I know you have a group of young people who that you're working with. We have grade school and high school students who write postcards as part of their civics class. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they love it because you normally don't necessarily want, you don't want grade school students on the phone, they can't do that. But grade school students, this gives them an opportunity to practice their penmanship. Oh, we've got whole civics classes in a number of schools that are participating in this.
Okay. Next question is, my family lives in Cape Charles in the Eastern Shore of Virginia. Have you ever done a training session for folks in that area?
No.
And do you have contact there?
Nope.
No, you don't. Okay, great,
No.
great.
we used to do what we called, well, we hold office hours every week where people who want to join our programs can sign up for office hours. And then we have someone that's there, normally the leader of the postcard team, the leader of the phone bank team. They will get you started, answer any questions, make sure you get off on the right foot. And those are normally either a Friday or a Saturday, and those are regularly scheduled. So I will, Dorinda, when I send you your package, I will include when our office hours are. We used to do an update every Thursday night at 8 o'clock. We have grown 650% in the past 60 days. Center for Common Ground has no staff. I don't even work for Center for Common Ground. I'm a founding board member. So we managed to bring the board in, and the board has agreed to basically staff Center for Common Ground. So we have a national partners table, which are our corporate partners, Salesforce, NBC, Microsoft, Women for Apple, and then we have our faith leaders, partners who sit at that table, National UU the Vote, the Religious Action Center on Reform Judaism, American Ethical Union, and now United Church of Christ, so that the big national organizations can say, well, this is what we'd like to do, this is how we'd like to do it. We can figure out if maybe this is something that would be something we want to implement for everybody, not just our national leaders. So this could be a good place for the national Pan-Hellenics to come in and be at the national partners table.
Understood. Are there any other questions? I'm looking in the chat to see
Great
if there are any
question, by the way.
Okay. Yes, they have been. Yes, Mildred, we have someone here. She's raised her hand. Mildred Shannon, please. I've unmuted you.
Yes. I wanted to know if college students would be able to register where they're in school if they go back, or will they have to register in their home state?
And that's going to vary wildly, state to state. So we would have to literally look at what state are they in, and then look at what are the rules. Remember, COVID-19 has thrown everybody's rules kind of up in the air. We're going, oh, we never actually thought about this. Yes, they are a student at our school. However, they're going to school in Texas, but they live in New Mexico. Do we want them to vote in New Mexico, or will we permit them to vote in Texas? You know, it gets interesting now where we go, what constitutes residency?
Okay. And can we ask for volunteers to become poll greeters through the use of postcarding to younger people? This is another question regarding postcarding to the youth. And I think that there's
for the youth, I have found texting is the best recruitment tool. Remember, postcarding it goes out. Now we can send them a sign-up link and various other things like that. But I was really thinking of building a texting program exclusively for recruiting younger people to be poll workers. We have been very, very successful with recruitment programs over text.
okay.
And then we have a new tool. I'm putting it here in chat. It just released in the Android store yesterday. It's called VoteForce. What VoteForce does is it allows us to, everybody who has the app, they can say, I want to be part of the Reclaim Our Vote campaign. And then we can send you messaging that you can then share with people that are in your address book. And we don't know who you shared the message with.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah.
And so this is on Android and iPhone, or just
Android and iPhone, yes. It literally came out on Android yesterday.
okay.
We
Is
don't
there
have
any-
a lot of messages up there yet, but we do have a tool called Voterly. I'm going to be talking to the MotiVote people about, do I want to just use my one copy of MotiVote and put everybody on there, because it does seem to work just fine without all the customizations for each individual state, because there really aren't that many. And then if that's the case, we'll put MotiVote on there. What's great about Voterly is, with Voterly, when you check your registration, you can sign up and say, automatically notify me if my registration status changes.
Okay. Are there any other questions from our participants? If you have a question, please post it. Oh, we have another one from Mildred here. Mildred?
Yes, I'd like to know if this presentation is available for local use.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I just put a link in the chat. If you want to sign up to use text%, you can sign up on that form. Now, again, remember, everything that we do is nonpartisan. We don't support candidates or parties. It's just, we support voters. We want to make certain that voters are going to be able to go out and vote safely, and have their vote counted.
Okay, someone made a comment here, how appropriate we're having this session today about GOTV, because voting is what John Lewis, Congressman Lewis, who just passed away,
Yes.
fought for years.
Yes.
And she says, this is from our president of the DC Democratic Women's Club, she says, we will get this done.
Yes.
We will get this done. Are there any other questions before? Okay, you have a question here, Jeanette? Oh, no question? Okay.
I have
If
a
there-
question.
Yes, go ahead, Hazel.
First of all, thank you so very much for this really enlightening presentation. And I was the person who asked the question about Cape Charles, because your organization is headquartered in Virginia. And
Yes.
of course, that's a rural part of Virginia. And so even though you've not done a presentation before, do you have any contacts there, or is there? I'm trying to connect you with the people there. And I say that because many of our members also are from places like South Carolina, North Carolina,
Yes.
places in the South, and we need to connect our relatives
Yes.
to this information.
Yes.
Because that's a part
Yes.
of getting out the vote too.
Yes.
Thank you.
That is something where Vote Force could be very, very useful for that, where we set up, all right, this is what we want to let people know about our organization. And then we give them a means to say, I want to know more. Can we do a presentation? Can we do this? Because if they've never heard of us, I've never heard of them, how are we going to hook up? It is my goal to rebuild what Dr. King called the coalition of conscience, where we have
Yes.
our faith partners and our labor partners, and then our progressive brothers and sisters all marching together lockstep for voting rights. And this time we're marching all the way to the Constitution.
Oh, okay, okay. Well,
Remember, I'm a lobbyist.
yes. Well, are there any other questions before we wrap this up today? Andrea has shared her contact information. And Andrea, if you could share that again.
Yep,
You're
putting it
there.
in there right now. That is my best email address. You can text me. This is my cell number. Now, be aware. My husband had open heart surgery. He has major complications. Right now, I'm spending 6 to 8 hours every day at the hospital. When we get done, I'm going to be heading off to the hospital. So I may not be able to get back to you as quickly as I normally would, but I will be getting back to you.
Okay, and I did speak with her.
Dorinda?
Yeah. Yes.
Hi, this is Estelle from the Metropolitan MWDC. I would like to say that our club is participating in the postcard writing. We've already received our 1,000 for North Carolina. We have found the staff very, very cooperative. We've enjoyed working with you, and we will begin our postcard sending to North Carolina in the next couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, the head of the North Carolina NAACP Political Action Committee, he sent me an email where he had a picture of his pledge to vote and do more. The 1.4 million North Carolina addresses basically were sent out in roughly 3 weeks.
Well, we're anxious. We have ours. We have ours.
All right.
I am from North Carolina, which makes it even better.
Excellent. Wonderful.
Perlene Preston wants to be unmuted, and I can't see Perlene to unmute. Perlene Preston.
I got her.
You have, can you unmute her?
Well, theoretically.
Perlene Preston, I don't see.
If you do a search for PEAR, I'm clicking on mute. There it is.
Perlene?
You're unmuted, Perlene. No.
Hello? Perlene?
Yep, she's unmuted.
Yeah, I'm
Hey,
trying to
Perlene.
get the video back. Hold on, let me see.
Go ahead and ask a question, Perlene.
I have a question.
Perlene?
Tell you trying to get you to unmute your video.
Trying to unmute the video.
We don't need the video, just ask.
Okay, well, I don't have any questions at this time.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, no problem.
Okay. Someone asked the name of the app that was just recently released. If you could repeat that again, please. It was Voter
The name of the app is Vote Force.
Vote Force.
Vote
Yes.
Force. Again,
Yes.
the engineer came up with this name. I'm like, what?
Okay. Well, just letting everyone know that this presentation is being recorded, so we'll be able to share it with the DC Democratic State Committee and other organizations, so they can call the information that's being shared here today. So although I urged everyone to have a pad and a pen to take information down, we are acutely aware that this is a Saturday morning. So we will make this available.
And I can't talk at the speed of light when I want to. So I know a lot of information came at people. It's like, whoa.
Yes, that's very true. Do we,
Madam President,
yes,
this is Jeanette Mobley. Just a couple quick things. First of all, we, the DC Democratic Women Club, we also look forward to working with you. Your presentation was wonderful as always, and it is so kind of you to take time out of your busy schedule, knowing that you have a husband, a beloved husband that's having health challenges, to impart this information to us. So that's just wonderful. And to our president, Dorinda White, thank you so much, Madam President, for bringing us together on this day, because this is very refreshing, enlightening, and we have a lot of good information that we can use to move forward. We will, even though you're nonpartisan, we will make sure that we get this vote out and that we have a Democratic victory come November. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. And when we get together, I make ice cream. So when we get together, I will join you with homemade ice cream. Now, my new favorite flavors, white chocolate raspberry, new personal favorite. My coffee is wonderful. And then there's always pistachio almond fudge.
Lindia Grant, who is on from her show. We were on her show last night. Would you like to share a few words, Lindia?
Yes, I was thinking, I took notes. I'm so glad you said you were going to send us a copy, because I want to get my sorority involved, because people know I've been involved in politics so much in DC. My national president of, but not a Pan-Hellenic, we're business and professional sorority. Gamma Phi Delta sorority founded in Detroit, Michigan. We're located right across from Motown headquarters, Hitfield, USA. And so they asked me to be on the legislative committee. So I told my national president that I would be listening. I'm having an allergy attack. I took a Benadryl. My eyes are running, but I had still stayed right here and took good notes. And I'll be listening for the copy so I can share that with everybody. And I too am from North Carolina, and I want to see what I can do. And I saw a comment from a pastor, I think. He said they're going to share it with his congregation. I work hand in hand with my pastor, so I want to try to see what I can do about, the ministers' conference, because I went to the ministers' conference when we were meeting and doing things with Reverend Jerry Moore and my pastor, so we can talk about, and Councilman Frank Smith, to talk about the African American Civil War Memorial. So I know it's so good when you can get to that ministers' conference.
Yes.
So I gotta get a way to, when I get them on my radio show, they'll listen because of that, because they want to get back on there again. And I want to also invite you, Ms. Mitchell, to be my guest too. So let's talk about a good time, and then we can share that copy. I'm having a little trouble with doing this thing from home. I want to go back in the studio, but we can't go in the studio. Kathy Hughes don't want nobody dying on her watch, and I understand. But I'm trying to figure out how to make this show a little better. I heard a lot of feedback in the show last night. It kind of got better, but I'm talking to some technicians to help. It'll get better as we go. We just have to keep going. Even the TV shows, you see how they be talking over top of each other. It's a mess sometimes, but we'll just do the best we can. But I will be in touch on my own behalf, and also for my sorority and the churches.
All right, excellent.
And I forgot to write in my column in the Informer, because a lot of people read my column.
That's
so
right.
I got to figure out how to get all that in.
All right, all right. We'll figure it out. And what is lovely is this is July. We have time. Now, we started on January 4th. Most normal people want to start in September. We are ahead of the curve.
Okay.
And I see here you posted here, Andrea, that there's a meeting scheduled on July 22nd for the Alliance of Moral Progressives in North Carolina.
Yes.
Okay, so
give me a moment, and I'm going to pull that link. Right, I actually remember where I left it, so I'm going to go pull that link. Let me go grab that. And here is the registration link.
Okay, and we want to thank you also, Andrea, because before you, we had Dyana Forrester from the labor movement. So we're glad that we were able to make that connection today and have her share some of what's going on with the AFL-CIO. And then you mentioned it also in yours. So if we wanted to wrap this all up and give basically a parting wish or parting mission, what would you want to share with us?
2020 has the ability to be the greatest election we have ever seen, where again, we reassemble the coalition of power and communities of color discover the power of their vote. Because after this election, there will be an opportunity to make change at all levels, including the way the economy works. This will be historic. let us control that narrative and the history and make it what we want and what we deserve.
Right, thank you. And with that, I'd like to, everyone, please thank Andrea Miller and Dyana Forrester for their presentations today. And she's going to run off to go to the hospital to be with her lovely husband, Rick. And on behalf of the DC Federation of Democratic Women and Team 2020, we thank you for taking time out today to actually join us. And we hope that we shared information that you are going to take and share with others, because it shouldn't just stop with us. We need to take this information and share it with the contacts and people that we know in the various states around the country, especially the battleground states. So we will have the link for this. If you, I put my information in here. Andrea's information is in here also. We would welcome any input or feedback that you may want to share with us. But the most important thing that we need to make certain of is that we get out the vote and that we don't allow our vote to be suppressed. Because if we do, the lives of people like our Congressman John Lewis, who just died, we do not want their presence and their efforts to be in vain. And with that, we're closing out on time by 12 noon. And please feel free to reach out to Andrea Miller or to myself and to the DC Federation of Democratic Women. You can reach out to Lavanya Mobley, Jeanette Mobley, or to Estelle Lloyd. If you email me or email Estelle or Jeanette, we will make certain that we get you involved. Thank you again. And thank you for joining us. And thank you, Andrea, again, for taking time out to share your pearls of wisdom. And Liz Duarte from the National Federation of Democratic Women, she's our Eastern Regional Director. Liz, would you like to say something? She hosted us today.
Hi.
Liz?
Yes. This has been wonderful. Andrea, this is maybe the 5th time I've had the absolute pleasure and honor to hear you and to see you on Zoom. And besides the fact I'd love to have your ice cream, but you and I always, we always get more information. We always get so much more. And the enthusiasm and the dedication that you have put in since for the last 4 years, you've already done a phenomenal job. And I just, with this many number of women and this strong, we're going to do it. We're absolutely going to do it. And I thank the DC women, and I thank you, Dorinda, for putting this together. And the more we get out there, the more we work together, the stronger we are, and we're going to do it. We're going to win in November, and it's going to be because of all the hard work that everyone here is doing. So I just want to thank you.
And I'm going to echo that. Thank you, Dorinda. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Dyana. All the people who are working now and who will be working even harder as we really go into this election season, because we are going in with our eyes open and we know what the stakes are. We get it. And as women, we know when we look around and there is no hero, all right, we're the heroes, the heroes we were looking for.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful weekend.